Today I want to talk to you about 5 different influences on my first feature film, Impossible to Imagine, or 想像が出来ない in Japanese. And the first one is The Tale of Genji. Epic enough. So it's one of the first long serialized romances in the world, way before Mills and Boons and Twilight and all the other ones that you can find for $1 on Kindle. They had Tale of Genji. Tale of Genji is the story of a very aristocratic courtier called Genji, who basically sleeps his way through the court looking for hidden flowers or good lays in surprising places. And rather than focusing on that aspect, I was intrigued by one of the later chapters in the end half of the epic, where it starts getting a little bit darker for Genji. And in particular, a chapter called Ukifune, which is set in the city of Uji. And it's a story about a young woman who's kind of torn between 2 different loves. An impetuous, wild young man and a steady, serious type. And one of them takes her out on the boat, and she's floating out on the boat, and she has to make this choice, and in the end she's not really happy with it. So that imagery, that poetic floating, having to choose, this stark comparison, these are very much ingrained into this script. So Tale of Genji. The second influence is a documentarian called Ichikawa Kon, who made a documentary in the 70s called The Heart of Japan, Kyoto, The Heart of Japan. And it's a very artistic documentary, lots of beautiful imagery of Kyoto. And for example, you have the snow slowly falling on the Zen rock garden at Roanji. You have the straw-hatted barefoot monks wandering the streets of Kyoto asking for alms. You have the high shoes of the geisha walking through the streets. And then you have this sequence of shots of the inside of, I think it's an imperial villa, and the shoji, the screen doors, open by themselves in sequence, and the camera goes through and the doors go shh, 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 like that. And I love that scene. I really like that. So that scene, I really wanted to make a homage to it, so I did. That's one of the scenes that is in the film. Another influence that I guess was kind of like ticking away in the back of my head as I started writing the script was the romantic movies, Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, where these 2, young people meet and wander around a beautiful city together. And I kind of wish I could have done that as well as those movies, especially Before Sunrise, where the city is basically the backdrop of their romance. I do have these long walking and talking shots, which were particularly difficult for the actors because you can't cut so much within them, and they would be quite long takes, and I'd be walking backwards with my gimbal. So maybe it's a good thing that I didn't have too many of those, but that was definitely an influence of something I wanted to include, this walking, talking, getting to know each other style of shot. Big influence on the voice of characters, especially like Hayato, were interviewing the actors. When I first met William and we spoke for an hour and a half, 2 hours about his life in Japan, how he'd grown up, that became the basis of a lot of how Hayato grew up and a lot of what Hayato would express to Ami. He doesn't feel very comfortable with speaking in Keigo, which is a very polite form of Japanese, because it's quite constricting and you can't really express yourself very much with Keigo. So he and Hayato both have this dislike of Keigo. Luke, who was another guy who I interviewed, he was the one who had this concept of being the bridge, because he works in companies as not just a translator but also a kind of cultural translator, bringing, the American perspective and the Japanese perspective together, or the British perspective and the Japanese perspective together, because they are quite different perspectives. And having people like Luke or like William who understand two cultures very well, that's the kind of people that Japan needs at the moment. And the final influence, I guess, on my editing style at least, is YouTube. Because I'm more of a YouTube video maker, documentaries and travelogues and such, and that kind of cutting style, and there's some freeze frame effects that I use, and things like speed ramping, and I don't think these are very cinematic. So maybe I need to build up my cinematic film skills. Who knows? Maybe people will like it. We'll see. So yeah, those are my 5 big influences for Impossible to Imagine or 想像ができない. Bye!